May 10th, 1968. Kham Duc Special Forces Camp, Central Highlands, South Vietnam. The first mortar round hits at 03:15 hours, and Green Beret Staff Sergeant John Carey is already awake when it detonates. He's been awake for 3 hours, listening to something wrong in the darkness beyond the wire. A silence too complete, too deliberate. The explosion tears through the camp's motor pool, sending a fireball climbing into the pre-dawn sky that turns the surrounding mountains into jagged silhouettes. Then the world becomes noise. Carey rolls from his cot in the team house as the second round impacts, closer now, walking toward the operations center. He's pulling on his boots when the third shell caves in the eastern wall of the adjacent structure. Through the settling dust and screaming, he can hear the distinctive crump, crump, crump of 82mm mortars, dozens of them firing in coordinated sequence from the hills. This isn't harassment fire. This is preparation. The camp erupts into controlled chaos. Master Sergeant Frank Penn is already on the radio net, his voice cutting through static and explosions as he establishes contact with the defensive positions. Outside, tracers begin lacing the darkness, green NVA rounds incoming, red American rounds going out. Carey grabs his Car 15 and moves into the night, his boots crunching on shattered sandbags and spent brass that's already accumulating in drifts. Kham Duc sits in a valley surrounded by 1,000-meter peaks covered in triple canopy jungle, and tonight those peaks are alive with muzzle flashes. The camp itself is a rough rectangle, 12 American Special Forces personnel, 17 Australian Army advisors, and approximately 2,500 Montagnard CIDG fighters and their families. Beyond the wire, in the darkness and jungle, are elements of the NVA 1st and 2nd Divisions. Perhaps 5,000 soldiers who've been moving into position for weeks, undetected, patient as stones. Carey reaches Bunker 7 on the northeastern perimeter as a rocket-propelled grenade screams overhead so close he can feel its heat. Inside, 4 Montagnard fighters are returning fire in disciplined 3-round bursts, their M16s hot to the touch. Their team leader, a wiry man called Din, points into the darkness. "Beaucoup VC," he says in the pidgin French-Vietnamese English that serves as common language. "They come soon." Carey doesn't need binoculars to believe him. The volume of incoming fire is increasing exponentially. Automatic weapons, recoilless rifles, more mortars. The NVA are conducting a textbook assault. Fix the enemy with indirect fire, suppress the defensive positions, then close with infantry. Through gaps in the smoke, Carey can see movement in the wire. Not probing. Advancing. At the command bunker, Captain Charles Rushforth is receiving reports that read like a nightmare itemized. The airstrip has taken 12 direct hits and is cratered. The ammunition dump is burning. The eastern perimeter reports enemy infantry at the wire in company strength. The western perimeter reports the same. The communications bunker has lost its primary antenna. The camp's 105mm howitzers are firing direct fire missions at targets less than 200 meters away. And then the ground assault begins in earnest. They come in waves, emerging from the jungle like a rising tide. NVA regulars in pith helmets and khaki uniforms, carrying AK-47s and satchel charges, moving with the discipline of professional soldiers. The camp's defenses, claymore mines, machine gun positions, interlocking fields of fire, exact a terrible toll, but still they come. The wire erupts with Bangalore torpedoes, blowing gaps through the concertina. The killing grounds between wire lines fill with bodies, and the assault waves step over their own dead without hesitation. Carey is moving between positions now, directing fire, redistributing ammunition, pulling wounded Montagnards back from exposed fighting positions. A mortar round lands 10 feet away, showering him with dirt and shrapnel. He doesn't feel the metal that opens his left shoulder, doesn't register the blood soaking through his tiger-stripe fatigues. There's no time. At Bunker 4, the crew-served .50 caliber has jammed. At Bunker 9, they're down to their last belt of ammunition. At Bunker 12, everyone is dead. The sky begins to lighten, not sunrise, but the false dawn of illumination rounds and burning structures. In that terrible light, Carey can see what they're facing. The NVA aren't just attacking the camp. They're surrounding it, cutting it off, preparing to overrun it completely. This isn't a raid. It's an annihilation. Captain Rushforth's voice crackles over the radio net, steady despite what he's seeing. "All positions. This is Alpha 6. Fix bayonets and stand fast. Air support inbound at first light. Hold what you've got." But first light is still 2 hours away and the NVA are already inside the wire. Carey sees them breach the perimeter at 0342 hours. A squad of NVA sappers who've crawled through the minefield on their bellies, probing for pressure plates with bamboo sticks, accepting casualties as the price of penetration. They're inside now, moving fast toward the communications bunker with satchel charges strapped to their backs. If they take out the radios, the camp dies in isolation. He doesn't think. He moves. The first NVA soldier is 30 feet away when Carey opens fire, his Car-15 chattering in 3-round bursts. The man goes down. The second turns, bringing up his AK-47, and Carey puts 2 rounds through his chest before the weapon levels. The third has his hand on the detonator when Sergeant Penn appears from the smoke, his shotgun booming once, twice. The sapper's body disintegrates and the satchel charge tumbles harmlessly into a crater. "They're everywhere!" Penn shouts over the cacophony. His face is black with powder residue, blood running from a scalp wound. "We've got breaches on 3 sides!" More NVA are flooding through the gaps now, and the fighting devolves into something primal. In the narrow alleys between bunkers and supply shacks, Americans and Montagnards engage enemy soldiers at arm's length. Carey empties his magazine into a cluster of shapes, reloads without looking, keeps firing. A grenade detonates against a sandbag wall, filling the air with fragments that sing like angry hornets. Someone is screaming in Vietnamese, someone else is screaming in English. At Bunker 7, Din and his Montagnard fighters have been pushed back into a final defensive position. The bunker's firing ports are blocked with enemy dead, and NVA soldiers are on the roof trying to drop grenades through the gun slits. Inside, ammunition is running critical. Din pulls the pin on his last fragmentation grenade, counts to 2, and throws it blind through the opening. The explosion overhead is followed by silence, then more footsteps. Carey fights his way to their position, moving through a landscape that's been transformed into hell. The motor pool is an inferno. The dispensary has collapsed, burying wounded men in rubble. A Montagnard child, no more than 8 years old, sits beside her dead mother, silent in shock, while tracers streak overhead in geometric patterns of death. He scoops the girl up without breaking stride, deposits her in a drainage ditch behind the command bunker, and keeps moving. The Australian advisors have formed a reaction force and are counterattacking toward the eastern breach, their Owen guns and L1A1 rifles creating a wall of fire that momentarily checks the NVA advance. Warrant Officer Kevin Conway leads them, his voice hoarse from shouting commands, coordinating fields of fire with hand signals when the noise makes speech impossible. They retake Bunker 11 in a 5-minute firefight that leaves the interior ankle-deep in spent casings and blood. But for every breach sealed, another opens. The NVA have committed their reserves, feeding fresh troops into the assault. They're accepting catastrophic losses. The approaches to the camp are carpeted with bodies, but their advantage in numbers is overwhelming. For every NVA soldier that falls, 3 more advance. The math is simple and terrible. At 0415 hours, Carey finds himself defending a 100-meter stretch of perimeter with 6 Montagnards, 2 Australians, and approximately 400 rounds of ammunition between them. The NVA come again, a human wave attack that ignores casualties driven by whistles and shouted commands. Carey's Car-15 runs dry. He transitions to his .45 pistol. When that's empty, he picks up a fallen AK-47, still hot from its previous owner's grip, and keeps firing. The weapon jams. An NVA soldier, barely visible in the smoke, levels his rifle at Carey from 20 feet away. Time stretches. Carey can see the man's finger tightening on the trigger, can see the exhaustion and fear in his eyes. A conscript farmer from some northern village, probably, thrust into this meat grinder by forces beyond his control. The shot doesn't come. The soldier jerks backward as Din's M16 stitches him across the torso. The Montagnard warrior says nothing, just pulls Carey behind cover as a fresh volley of fire tears through the space they occupied seconds before. In the command bunker, Captain Rushforth is performing battlefield triage on the radio net, prioritizing catastrophes. The airstrip is unusable. No resupply, no reinforcement, no evacuation. The ammunition situation is critical across all positions. They've got 17 confirmed KIA, 43 wounded, and those numbers are climbing. The NVA have breached the wire in 4 locations and are conducting coordinated attacks on key facilities. He keys the radio to Da Nang. "Covey, this is Kham Duc. We are decisively engaged. Repeat, decisively engaged. Camp is being overrun. Request immediate air support, any available. How copy?" Static. Then, Kham Duc, Covey, understand decisively engaged. First light and 45 mics, fast movers launching now. Spooky gunship inbound your location, ETA 12 minutes, call sign, Spooky 71. Hold on, brother, we're coming. 12 minutes. In a firefight, 12 minutes is a lifetime. Carey has found more ammunition, scavenged from the dead, both friendly and enemy, and returned to the line. His shoulder wound has stopped bleeding or gone numb. He can't tell which, and doesn't care. Around him, the Montagnards fight with desperate courage, these indigenous warriors who've been promised American protection, who've cast their lot with the Special Forces, who now face annihilation if the camp falls. They know what the NVA do to CIDG fighters and their families. Surrender isn't an option. At 0424 hours, they hear it, the distinctive sound of a C-47 gunship's engines growing louder, closer. Spooky 71 arrives ahead of schedule, and when her miniguns open fire, it sounds like God-tearing canvas. The night lights up with streams of red tracers so dense they appear solid, 100 rounds per second pouring into the NVA positions outside the wire. The effect is instantaneous and apocalyptic. Entire assault formations simply cease to exist, replaced by cratered earth and silence. But the NVA inside the wire are still fighting, still advancing, still dying and killing in the smoke and darkness. And Carey, blood-soaked and ammunition depleted, realizes they haven't seen the worst yet, because in the growing light he can see what's moving down from the hills. Armor. PT-76 tanks, their turrets traversing toward the camp, preparing to finish what the infantry began. The first tank round hits the western perimeter at 0441 hours, and the entire defensive line ceases to exist. The 76mm shell detonates against Bunker 3's reinforced position, collapsing the structure and killing everyone inside instantly. The PT-76 advances through its own smoke, treads grinding over wire and bodies, turret rotating to acquire the next target. Behind it, 2 more tanks emerge from the tree line, their hulls painted in jungle camouflage, moving with mechanical certainty toward the camp's dying heart. Carey is running before he consciously decides to move. The camp has exactly one weapon capable of stopping armor, a 106mm recoilless rifle positioned near the ammunition point, which is currently on fire. He sprints through intersecting fields of machine gun fire, weaving between burning structures, his lungs raw from smoke and exertion. Rounds snap past close enough to feel, kicking up dirt at his feet, punching through corrugated metal with sounds like hammer strikes. He reaches the position to find Sergeant First Class Michael Torres already there, desperately trying to traverse the massive weapon toward the approaching tanks while simultaneously loading the 20-pound projectile. Torres's right arm hangs useless, shattered by shrapnel, but he's working the mechanism one-handed with grim determination. Blood pools in his boots. "Get out of here!" Torres shouts when he sees Carey. "This thing's got maybe one shot before—" The ammunition point erupts. The explosion is biblical, 10,000 pounds of ordnance detonating in a chain reaction that lifts the earth itself. The shockwave flattens buildings, throws men like rag dolls, and turns the eastern third of the camp into a crater. Carey feels himself lifted, flying, then slamming into something solid that drives the air from his lungs. When his vision clears, he's 20 feet from where he stood, and Torres is gone. The recoilless rifle position simply erased. The nearest PT-76 is 60 meters away and closing. Its turret rotates, the main gun elevating slightly, finding range. Carey can see the commander in the open hatch, can see him speaking into his radio, coordinating with his sister vehicles. In seconds, that gun will fire, and whatever it hits will cease to matter. But Spooky 71 has seen the tanks too. The gunship banks hard, her miniguns searching for angle, and then she opens fire. 6,000 rounds per minute hammer the lead tank, sparking off its armor in a fountain of tracers. The PT-76's thin armor, designed to float, sacrificing protection for mobility, begins to fail. Rounds penetrate the engine deck, the turret ring, the crew compartment. The tank slews sideways, smoke pouring from hatches, and stops. The commander tries to bail out. He doesn't make it. The second tank fires at the gunship and misses. The third reverses into the jungle, seeking cover. Spooky 71 pursues, relentless, her guns tearing apart vegetation and armor with equal indifference. But she's getting low on fuel and ammunition. Captain Rushforth's voice cuts through the radio net. "Spooky 71, Kham Duc actual, you are Winchester and bingo fuel. RTB, repeat, return to base. Thanks for the help, brother." "Kham Duc Spooky, Roger bingo. Good luck down there. Fast movers inbound your post, 2 minutes. And then the gunship is gone, and the camp is alone again with its dying. Dawn arrives not as hope but as revelation. In the growing light, Carrie can see what they've survived and what still awaits. The camp is devastated, half its structures destroyed, the airstrip cratered beyond use, defensive positions overrun or abandoned. Bodies lie everywhere, American and Montagnard and NVA intermingled in death's democracy. The wounded outnumber the effective fighters, ammunition stocks are nearly exhausted, and the NVA are regrouping. Through binoculars, Carrie watches them consolidating in the tree line, bringing up fresh troops, preparing for another assault. They've paid a horrific price, thousands dead in the wire and killing grounds, but their command has committed to taking this camp, and they have the numbers to spend. The math hasn't changed. At 0503 hours, the fast movers arrive, 2 F-4 Phantoms screaming in low, their bombs and napalm transforming the jungle approaches into walls of flame. The earth shakes with their ordnance, trees explode, NVA soldiers caught in the open are incinerated or shredded. For 10 minutes, the airstrikes create a firebreak of destruction around the camp's perimeter. But everyone knows it's temporary. The NVA will wait out the air support, then come again. And eventually, the planes will run out of fuel or ordnance or patience. The camp cannot be held. The question is no longer if it falls, but how many die before it does. Captain Rushforth receives the order at 0522 hours, transmitted from MACV headquarters in Saigon. The message is brief. Evacuate Kham Duc. Destroy all equipment. Extract all personnel. You have until 1200 hours. Good luck. Evacuate. The word seems impossible. The airstrip is destroyed. The camp is surrounded. They have 1,500 Montagnards, fighters and families with nowhere to go and no way to get there. And the NVA are already moving again, using the lull after the airstrikes to advance closer, tightening the noose. Rushforth begins issuing orders with the calm of a man who's already calculated the odds and accepted them. Demolition charges will be placed on all sensitive equipment. The wounded will be consolidated at the northern perimeter, closest to where helicopters might land. The Montagnards will be told that evacuation is coming, though no one can promise when or how, and every man capable of fighting will hold the line until the last aircraft lifts off, or until there's no one left to fly. Carey finds himself assigned to a composite squad of Americans and Montagnards tasked with holding the eastern approach, the most likely avenue for the next NVA assault. His group consists of 8 men, 3 of whom are wounded badly enough they should be evacuated but refuse to leave. They have perhaps 400 rounds of ammunition total, a dozen grenades, and 1 M60 machine gun with 2 belts remaining. Din appears beside him, his M16 battered but functional, his face expressionless. "We stay?" he asks. Carey looks at this warrior who's fought beside him for 6 months, who's trusted American promises of protection, whose family is somewhere in the camp's chaos. "Bird's coming," he says, not knowing if it's true. "Get everybody out." "And you?" "We buy time." Din nods once, understanding perfectly. Time is the only currency they have left to spend. He takes his position in the line, checking his ammunition, saying nothing more because nothing more needs saying. At 0547 hours, the NVA come again. This time they use the craters and rubble for cover, advancing by fire teams, coordinating their assault with mortars that drop with mathematical precision. This time, they're not concerned with speed. They know the camp is dying. They can afford to be patient, methodical, professional. And Carey's small squad, bleeding and exhausted and nearly out of ammunition, prepares to sell their lives as expensively as possible. The NVA advance is textbook perfect. Fire and movement, squad by squad, using the rubble of destroyed bunkers for cover. Carey's M60 gunner, a Montagnard named Bao, fires in short bursts to conserve ammunition, each burst dropping 1 or 2 attackers. But for every NVA soldier that falls, 3 more continue advancing. They're 60 meters away now, then 50. Carey tosses his third-to-last grenade, watching it arc through the smoky air and detonate among a cluster of advancing soldiers. The explosion buys them 30 seconds. He uses those seconds to redistribute the squad's remaining ammunition, 11 magazines between 8 rifles. Combat mathematics, maybe 90 seconds of sustained fire before they're throwing rocks. Then he hears it, rotor blades, distant but growing louder. Through the smoke and chaos, a CH-47 Chinook materializes like something from a fever dream, flying impossibly low, taking ground fire from every direction. Tracers converge on its fuselage. It shouldn't be flying, it shouldn't be here, but it is. Flaring hard over the northern perimeter, its ramp already dropping before the wheels touch dirt. "Fall back!" Carey screams. "Fall back to the LZ!" The squad begins a fighting withdrawal, moving in pairs while others cover. Bow's M60 runs dry. He drops the weapon and transitions to his pistol, firing as he runs. An NVA round catches him in the leg. He stumbles but keeps moving, supported by another Montagnard. Carey provides covering fire until his Car 15 locks open on an empty magazine, his last magazine. He draws his .45, fires twice at shapes in the smoke, and runs. The scene at the landing zone is controlled chaos. Wounded are being loaded first, then families, then fighters, everyone moving with desperate urgency while the perimeter collapses around them. The Chinook's door gunners are firing continuously, their miniguns creating a wall of suppressive fire that temporarily checks the NVA advance. Brass casings pour from the aircraft like metallic rain. Captain Rushforth stands outside the bird directing traffic with hand signals, his face a mask of concentration and exhaustion. He's loading others but not moving toward the ramp himself. Carey realizes with cold certainty that Rushforth intends to be on the last aircraft out, if there is a last aircraft. The Chinook lifts off impossibly overloaded, people packed into every available space, some clinging to the exterior as it claws for altitude. NVA tracers follow it up, sparking off the fuselage, but the big helicopter keeps flying, disappearing into the haze. And then there's silence. No more rotor blades. Just gunfire and explosions and the sounds of the camp dying in sections. Carey's squad has been reduced to 5 effectives. They've taken position in a partially collapsed bunker, sharing the last 2 magazines of ammunition, waiting for either rescue or death. The NVA are inside the camp now, moving building to building, eliminating the remaining defenders. Resistance has become pockets rather than a line. Isolated groups of Americans and Montagnards fighting their own private battles while the larger battle is already lost. At 0634 hours, another helicopter appears. Not a Chinook this time, but a UH-1 Huey. Smaller, more maneuverable, taking withering fire as it spirals down toward a crater that serves as improvised LZ. The pilot is either insane or heroic or both. The aircraft touches down for exactly 40 seconds. 15 people sprint from cover and pile aboard, including 2 men who shouldn't be able to run with their wounds but somehow do anyway. Carey isn't among them. His squad is too far away, pinned by fire from 3 directions. He watches the Huey lift off, watches it take hits that should bring it down but don't, watches it disappear carrying people who will live because of a pilot whose name he'll never know. Time loses meaning, minutes become hours, become minutes again. The sun climbs higher, indifferent to the carnage below. More helicopters come. C-123 transports attempting to land on the cratered runway, taking damage, aborting. A C-130 that actually touches down for 90 seconds before ground fire forces it back into the air, several people clinging to its loading ramp as it climbs. The aircraft doesn't return to base with them. By 0900 hours, Carey's position has become untenable. The NVA have worked around to their flank, and there's no ammunition left for the kind of firefight that's coming. Din says something in Montagnard that Carey doesn't understand but recognizes as prayer. The other fighters check their weapons, knives, and entrenching tools since bullets are gone, and prepare for a final stand that won't last long. Then Sergeant Penn appears through the smoke like a ghost, his uniform in tatters, dried blood covering half his face. "Move!" he shouts. "There's 1 bird inbound. Last chance!" They run. Carey doesn't remember the decision to run, only the running itself, through ruins and bodies and fire, NVA soldiers appearing and disappearing in the smoke, shots fired at point-blank range with weapons picked up from the dead. Din goes down, hit in the side, and Carey grabs him by the harness and drags him forward without stopping. The LZ is a nightmare of desperation. Maybe 200 people, Americans, Australians, Montagnards, crowded around a space barely large enough for 1 aircraft, while NVA fire pours in from multiple directions. Captain Rushforth is there, and Master Sergeant Penn, and a dozen others organizing what cannot be organized. Who goes, who stays, who lives, who dies. At 0947 hours, the last helicopter arrives. It's a Chinook, and it's already damaged, smoke trailing from one engine, hydraulic fluid spraying from the bullet holes. It settles into a hover above the LZ, unable to fully land because of ground fire, its ramp 3 feet off the earth. What happens next will never appear in any after-action report. People surge forward, not panicked but purposeful, helping wounded aboard first, lifting children up to waiting hands, organizing themselves into a human chain that feeds refugees into the aircraft's belly. The helicopter shudders under impacts, its pilots fighting to maintain hover while enemy rounds punch through thin aluminum skin. The door gunners fire until their weapons melt, then fire some more. Carey lifts Din into the aircraft, then turns back to help others. Penn is beside him doing the same. Rushforth is counting heads, calculating capacity against time against the enemy's closing noose. The helicopter is beyond overloaded, easily twice its rated capacity, but still people come. At GRO 953 hours, an RPG round passes 6 inches behind the Chinook's rotor hub. The aircraft lurches, nearly losing control. The pilot's voice comes over the external speaker, distorted but clear. "That's it! We're going now, or we're staying forever!" Carey grabs 2 more children and throws them toward the ramp. Penn lifts a wounded Montagnard and passes him up. Rushforth is trying to climb aboard when he sees movement. More people emerging from cover, running toward the LZ, 15 or 20 Montagnards who didn't get the word or couldn't make it sooner. The captain jumps back down. "Sir!" Penn shouts. "There's no time!" Rushforth ignores him, moving toward the approaching group, waving them forward urgently. The helicopter is lifting now, unable to wait longer without dying. The ramp is rising. Carey has one boot on the metal, one hand on the frame. He looks down at Penn, at Rushforth, at the last defender still on the ground. Time freezes. He can stay and die or go and live with what he's leaving behind. Penn physically throws him into the rising aircraft. "Go!" he screams. "Tell them what happened here!" The Chinook claws for altitude, overloaded and damaged and miraculous. Through the open ramp, Carey watches Kham Duc recede, watches Rushforth and Penn and the others form a final perimeter around the remaining Montagnards, watches them disappear into smoke and distance, watches the camp that held against thousands become a memory consumed by fire. They make it to Da Nang on one engine and prayer, the pilots nursing the dying aircraft home through sheer force of will. When the Chinook finally settles onto the tarmac, fluid and smoke pouring from a dozen wounds, 63 people emerge from a space designed for 33. Carey collapses on the runway. Din beside him still alive somehow, both of them staring at the sky and seeing nothing. Around them, the organized chaos of a major air base continues. Jets launching, supplies moving, the war machine grinding forward. No one seems to notice or care about what just happened at a small camp in the Highlands. Another battle, another withdrawal, another classified operation that will be buried in files marked secret. That night, Carey learns that Captain Rushforth, Sergeant Penn, and 47 others, Americans and Montagnards, were extracted by a later flight in a rescue operation flown by crews who refused orders to abort. He learns that the camp was officially evacuated with acceptable casualties. He learns that several Medal of Honor recommendations were downgraded to Silver Stars, then to Bronze Stars, then disappeared into classified files because acknowledging them would require acknowledging operations that officially never happened. He learns that he's expected to write no reports, give no interviews, tell no stories about what he saw. The defense of Kham Duc, the stand that held 5,000 NVA at bay for 8 hours with a handful of Green Berets and indigenous warriors, becomes something that never was. Buried in bureaucracy and classification and the fog of a war the country is trying to forget. But Carey remembers. He remembers Din fighting with a wounded warrior's courage. He remembers Torres operating a recoilless rifle one-handed until he ceased to exist. He remembers helicopter pilots flying into hell because soldiers needed them. He remembers Montagnards who trusted American promises and paid for that trust with their blood. He remembers, even though the Army says it never happened.